After 4 years since saying goodbye to her daughter and son-in-law, Abigail continued to wage an internal battle against the pain of loss. However, during a walk with her grandchildren, something extraordinary happened. She saw the deceased couple. This seemingly impossible encounter was about to unravel dark mysteries. Nothing is more chilling than tuning into the news and witnessing the growing whirlwind of violence that plagues our times. But what happens when this cruel and cold reality, which we often watch as mere spectators, ruthlessly bursts through our door, burying its sharp claws into our history? Mrs. Abigail experienced this anguish up close when cruel fate entered without asking permission and turned her life into a kaleidoscope of fear and despair. In an instant, her peaceful existence was shattered like a broken mirror, reflecting a distorted reality. Abigail was finishing up preparing a delicious meal because that night her grandchildren were coming to sleep over. A tasty cake, the favorite of grandchildren Amy and Charlie, children of her only daughter, Mary, was ready on the table. The grandchildren were staying the night with their grandmother so Mary and her husband could attend a play they had been looking forward to. Abigail's house was filled with liveliness and joy upon the arrival of Amy and Charlie. After the farewells between the parents and the children, Abigail was left with them as the couple set off for their commitment. Abigail loved having her 3-year-old twin grandchildren around. They were the sources of her joy. Together, they had fun with their grandmother, sharing stories. The sparkle in the children's eyes was unmistakable. Putting them to bed was easy after a day full of activities, leaving them exhausted. Meanwhile, not far away, Abigail's daughter and son-in-law were diving into their own night. Since the twins' arrival, moments alone had become rare for the couple. However, this night held a special role. It was the key to reigniting the flame that time had threatened to extinguish. After the theatrical performance reached its end, the couple made a decision. They chose a restaurant that carried memories of the early days of their relationship, a place filled with sighs and reminiscences. The restaurant was just a few blocks away from the theater, a walk that allowed them to savor the spring freshness and each other's company. Hand in hand, they strolled through the serene night, illuminated by the soft moonlight and bright stars. The gentle breeze caressed their skin. It was a scene worthy of fairy tales, an image that reminded them of the first pages of their love. But as in all great stories, a surprise element was about to come into play. An unexpected intruder was about to cross the path of these passionate lovers, turning their fairy tale into something more complex and mysterious than they ever imagined. As they chose a dark alley to shorten their journey, a terrifying scene unfolded before them. The darkness of the street seemed to grow dense and ominous, and it was at that moment that a shadowy figure emerged from the shadows, his hand gripping a weapon with threatening intent. Violence hung palpably in the air, and his sharp words cut like blades as he ordered them to hand over everything they owned. The couple now found themselves in a life-or-death situation. With racing hearts and deep fear, they understood they couldn't risk their lives for material possessions. With trembling hands, they began to hand over everything they had. Then, as the silence of the night was pierced by the sharp sound of a police siren, the assailant, already nervous, flinched like a cornered animal. Reacting to panic, the assailant abruptly fired the weapon in the direction of the couple. The gunshot rang out, a single flame burning in the darkness. Mary and her husband, now involuntary targets, were struck by the same ammunition. The piercing pain was accompanied by the echo of the gunshot, reverberating off the dark alley walls. The ominous sound caught the attention of the approaching police. A brief and intense chase unfolded, like shadows dancing in the night, until the assailant was finally cornered. Silence returned, but now it was a heavy silence, laden with tragedy. In that dark and unforgiving alley, fate had plotted a treacherous course. Mary and her husband's bodies now lay on the ground, victims of a complex web of events that had escaped their control. The alley, a silent witness, held the secrets of that tragic night. The phone rang in the darkness of the early morning, ripping through the silence urgently. Abigail's heart raced as she answered, but what she heard made her stagger. The news of her only daughter and son-in-law's sudden death hit her like a lightning bolt, an electric shock that pierced deep into her soul. The shock of that news reverberated through her like waves from an emotional earthquake, shaking everything she knew. Tears flowed, a flood of complex and indescribable emotions. The void that opened before her seemed endless, an abyss threatening to swallow everything she was. The cruelty, the banality of life being snuffed out in this way, was almost impossible to comprehend. Now, Abigail found herself invested with a new responsibility, raising her grandchildren, Amy and Charlie. These two young and curious souls, only 3 years old, carried the burden of losing their parents in a world yet to be fully understood. Every day, the sad and innocent question from the little ones cut through the air. Where are Mommy and Daddy? How to translate the pain of such a deep absence to such young minds? How to explain that those beloved figures would not return? It was a distressing task, a challenge that no one was truly prepared to face. Time, as always, charted its course. As the days unfolded, Abigail and the children found ways to cope with the void. A new routine emerged, a fragile balance between sorrow and the need to move forward. Together, they began to build a narrative that could embrace the memory of the absent parents while creating space for new joys. However, there was a difference in how they dealt with this loss. The children, surprisingly, sought to remember and share stories about their parents, as if they wanted to keep them alive through words. Each memory was like a thread that kept them connected to a part of their history. Abigail, on the other hand, preferred to hold the pain in silence. The wound was too deep. The loss was a shadow that obscured everything. Talking about it, bringing forth the intensity of the pain, was like tearing the heart apart repeatedly. 4 years had passed since that terrible crime. The twins, now 7 years old, found in their grandmother a figure of care and affection. Abigail felt an immense weight on her shoulders, a responsibility that transcended mere child-rearing. The task was monumental, to raise 2 human beings who were kind, compassionate, and resilient despite the circumstances. It was school vacation time, and a friend of Abigail, noticing the need for a break in the routine, extended an invitation. She invited Abigail and her grandchildren for a getaway, a small retreat for a few days in a cozy cabin in the mountains. The idea of breaking away from the daily routine, escaping worries, and providing the grandchildren with a glimpse of fun and relaxation brought a smile to Abigail's face. The scenery was truly magnificent. The cabin was nestled in the heart of a mountain, as if it belonged to the landscape itself. Around them, nature unfolded in all its wild beauty, with a panoramic view of a large lake reflecting the sky at the foot of the mountain. The children immediately set out to explore the surroundings. Abigail watched with tenderness as they embarked on this adventure. Like a concerned guardian, she reminded them not to venture too far into the forest and asked them to stay close to the cabin so they wouldn't get lost. As the first day gave way to dusk, the sun cast warm, golden hues across the horizon. The children still played outside while Abigail and her friend prepared dinner. Then, the plot took an unexpected turn. Abigail's granddaughter, Amy, rushed into the cabin, her breath uneven and eyes filled with urgency. The small, panting figure carried a restlessness. Breathlessly, she recounted a story that froze the air in the room. Amy explained that she and her brother Charlie had been playing hide and seek in the nearby forest. But the game had taken an unwanted turn when she lost track of Charlie. Even after calling out to him insistently, there was no sign of a response. Abigail's friend, familiar with the area, understood that the forest seemed like a maze of tangled trees and invisible paths. Recognizing the urgency of the situation, she grabbed the phone and started calling other residents of nearby cabins. The urgency of the situation propelled the community to act swiftly. Daylight was dwindling, and with each passing minute, the task of tracking any sign of the boy became more challenging. Shadows lengthened, swallowing the clues that could lead to Charlie. The searches continued, lanterns cutting through the darkness like stars in a night sky. But strangely, Charlie seemed to have vanished. The forest had swallowed his footsteps. Amy, Abigail's granddaughter, stood by the searchers, sharing information about the places she and Charlie had been. Her resilience was crumbling like a house of cards, unable to withstand the wind. Abigail's friend, seeing Amy's exhausted state, suggested that the girl be taken back to the cabin to rest, promising that the searches would continue. She reassured Amy that everything would be okay. Abigail, tenderly supporting her granddaughter, led her back to the cabin. In the cabin, as she lay with Amy, Abigail stroked her hair, trying to convey comfort. The fatigue of the tumultuous day weighed on her too, and her mind was a whirlwind of worries and silent prayers. As Amy's eyes slowly closed, carried away by exhaustion, Abigail also succumbed to exhaustion. Her sleep was restless, a frenzy of dreams and worries intertwining in a whirlpool of thoughts. In this almost sleep-like state, Abigail experienced something that seemed to transcend the bounds of dreaming. Her eyes, even closed, saw like never before. It was a dream, but so vivid and tangible that she could feel every breeze, every detail of the environment around her. In that vivid dream, Abigail found herself standing in the cabin, looking out the window. But what she saw through the glass was something that defied all explanations. There were her daughter and son-in-law, the same ones who had been taken by tragedy 4 years ago. Abigail's heart raced as she watched them. Their smiles were radiant, their eyes radiating peace. Abigail felt an invisible force pulling her, a silent call she couldn't ignore. Without hesitation, she followed the couple as they entered the forest, each step of theirs like a beacon guiding her way. Abigail followed them, her heart pounding, her feet advancing with determination. No matter how hard she tried, they stayed ahead, unreachable. Their hands were intertwined, their faces radiating a calmness Abigail couldn't explain. They walked deeper into the forest, their figures blending with the night shadows, until finally they stopped. Before them was a small crevice in the mountain, an entrance to a tiny cave. Abigail felt her heart racing, her emotions swirling. Her eyes met her daughter's eyes, Mary's smile a gentle light, and her words echoed in Abigail's mind. "Thank you, Mom, for taking care of my babies." It was then, with a start, that Abigail woke up. Her heart was pounding, her hands trembling. She sat up in bed, looked beside her where Amy slept peacefully, unaware of the journey her grandmother had just taken. Without hesitation, she rushed out of the cabin, her heart pounding as she raised her voice. I know where Charlie is." Her words were a mix of urgency and conviction. She asked everyone if they knew of any small cave in the forest, a cave that fit the description she had seen in her dream. The words flowed from her lips with a confidence she didn't know where it came from. The small cave described by Abigail's words wasn't far from the cabin. The volunteers gathered, their lanterns shining in the darkness of the forest. And there, inside that crevice in the mountain, was Charlie. His small, brave figure was enveloped by the light of the lanterns, his face a mixture of surprise and relief. Abigail was filled with awe and gratitude. Like angels sent from heaven, her deceased daughter and son-in-law had guided her to Charlie through that vision, at the edge between dream and reality. It was a sensation that transcended words. This experience changed how she lived her grief and her longing for her lost daughter. The grief hadn't vanished, but it had found a place where it coexisted with a sense of comfort. Abigail started to find joy in memories of her daughter, not just in tears and sadness, but also in shared laughter and memories filled with love. The vision brought a deep peace regarding raising her grandchildren. She had seen Mary's smile and gratitude in that vision, a silent confirmation that she was doing a good job. And so, in the quiet of that night in the mountain, Abigail found a peace she couldn't have predicted. The vision, whether a dream, a gift from heaven, or something beyond human understanding, had transformed her pain into something more, something that transcended sadness.